I'm going to show you how to make one of my favourite desserts, creme brulee, a fantastic emulsion of milk, eggs and cream. And we've got the basic ingredients here. So we've got some double cream, some full fat milk, some eggs, of which we want the yolks, not the whites, some sugar to go in the original mix along with some vanilla, and then also some sugar to go on top, which is then glazed with a blowtorch. It is perfection. Now, what we start with is a pan and some milk and cream. So we take the cream and pour it into the pan, and we're going to bring this up to a simmer. We're also going to add the milk to that as well. There we go. To flavour the milk and cream, we're going to add some vanilla. If you don't want to go out and buy vanilla, then go and get some vanilla extract, which comes in a little bottle. You can buy it in supermarkets, and it's very good. It's got a very good vanilla flavour. Not quite as good as the real thing, but very good. Extract is fine. Essence, ignore it completely. Awful stuff. Right, if you're using real vanilla pods, just split them in two all the way along, and then just loosen up the seeds a bit. But we're throwing the whole thing in, so you don't have to scrape them out too diligently. There we go. And we're going to add 2 vanilla pods to this one. More vanilla the better, I say. Chuck it all in. Now, something to remember about vanilla. Vanilla flavour is contained in the whole thing. So the seeds and the pods amount to the flavour of vanilla. If you only add the seeds, you're only getting 2/3 of the flavour. If you only add the pods, you're getting 1/3. So you really need to get the whole thing in there in order to take the whole flavour from it. It's also worth remembering that the flavour molecules of vanilla are fat soluble. So fatty liquids will withdraw the flavour perfectly, which is why they're not found in water-based sauces. So the vanilla is all in the cream now. That's going to infuse, come up to a simmer. Whilst that's happening, we have to do the other half of the basic recipe, which is the eggs. And for that mix, what we need is the egg yolks, not the egg whites. So to separate an egg, just tap the egg on the side of the bowl, halve the egg like that, and allow the yolk to fall from shell to shell, whilst the white falls between the shells. There we go. You can save the whites for soufflés or meringues or whatever you want to use them for. But the yolks is what's going to thicken this mixture. And it's worth noting that various brulee recipes will give you various amounts of egg to cream, and it's all based on the desired firmness of the finished dish. The more eggs you add, the firmer the finished dish will be. So those can go over there. We'll use those up later. The egg yolks have added to them some caster sugar, which is here. We'll just pour the caster sugar in, and we give it a good mix around with a whisk so that the yolks and the caster sugar become one mixture in themselves. We're not really trying to beat air into it. All we're trying to do is amalgamate the two, the sugar and the yolks, really well together. There we are. And that is perfect timing because the milk and the cream just coming up to the boil now. So we pour that onto our egg yolks and sugar. There we go. Vanilla pods and all. Get it all in there. Now, we mix this mixture around because what we're trying to do now is dissolve the sugar in the heat of the cream and the milk. And that has become one beautifully gelled liquid. It's now what is the beginnings of a custard. And were we to leave this on the stove, that would start to curdle. The proteins in the egg would all cook and you get a very lumpy mixture. But because we've taken it off, that's not really a problem. The choice now is you can either cool this down, keep it in the fridge and make the brulees tomorrow, or by far the quickest and easiest method is to make them from the temperature it is now, which is what we're going to do. So these are little individual brulee dishes. If you don't want to serve individual ones and you want to serve one large one, that's absolutely fine. You can buy large earthenware dishes and just pour the whole thing into a large dish. However, I think it's quite nice to give everybody their own so nobody steals your bit. Right, we're going to ladle this mixture. Remembering we've also got the vanilla pods in here. So we're going to carefully ladle the mixture into the dishes. And what we don't want at the moment is too many air bubbles getting in. So we're being quite careful with the way we just put the ladle in and we don't splash it into the dishes too much. Now you want to fill them 3/4 of the way because there is a bit of manoeuvring between table and oven and you don't really want them to spill over the edges. A little bit more. There we are. Okay. Now, the way these cook is they need to cook very, very slowly. And the best approach for that is to use something that chefs call a bain-marie or a hot water bath. And all that is a roasting tray like this with some hot water in. First of all, put your dishes into the bain-marie like that. And then boil a kettle and pour hot water into the bain-marie. And what that's going to do is hold the cooking temperature below boiling point. That's the whole point of this, is to reduce the cooking temperature within the tray. Whilst the outside temperature is hot, the actual custard is being held below boiling point so that the proteins don't curdle. So hot water in, and just take it at least half the way up the dishes so that most of them is held below that magic boiling point. And then that goes into an oven at about 150 degrees for about 35 minutes. Now, depending on how strong your oven is, will depend on whether it's 30 minutes, 35 or 40, but it's going to be somewhere around there. And the reason we cook it slowly at 150 degrees is to give us a bigger window to catch the right point when they're cooked. If we cook it fast, exactly the same thing will happen. They'll cook fine, but they'll be fine 1 second and overcook the next. By cooking it slowly, we just give ourselves a bigger window to get them out of the oven at the right time. So that now goes carefully into the oven. Now, these have had about 35, 40 minutes in the oven, and they should still be just very, very soft to the touch in the middle. That's because the custard is going to carry on cooking in its own heat all the time after you've taken it out. I'm actually going to cool these outside of the bain-marie because they don't need to cook on too much more. If you felt that they were slightly under, you could leave them in the bain-marie, which would allow them a little bit more cooking. So these should have a slight wobble, and if you can just see that, it's just moving very, very slightly. And that's because it's still very, very slightly undercooked, which is a good thing because they're going to cook on in their own heat. So just take them out the bain-marie, cool them down, and then they're ready for glazing. Now, the custard is completely set, it's chilled in the fridge, and it's ready to glaze. Traditionally, the advice is to sprinkle it with demerara sugar and put it under the grill. The problem with doing that is that the grill, by the time it's melted the demerara sugar, will have started to re-cook the custard, which is not good news. So what chefs in kitchens tend to do now is to use one of these, a blowtorch, because that gives you a far more instant control of the caramel and doesn't cook the custard underneath. And we also use caster sugar instead of demerara, same result. So just sprinkle the top with some caster sugar like that, getting a nice even coating so you can see some sugar all over. Light your blowtorch, and this is where the fun begins. And then all we do is point the gun at the brulee and just start the caramelization. And as soon as you start to see it caramelize in one particular spot, move the focus of the flame along so it caramelizes the next bit. Because if you hold it there too long, it'll burn. And at this point, what we're trying to do is build up an initial glaze. What we'll find with this is that the layer we've done is only very, very shallow and probably won't be brittle enough. So what I'd advise now is to go back in with a second layer. So sprinkle some more sugar on top of the caramel, and then we do exactly the same again, so that we build up a nice even glaze on top. There's nothing worse than having a creme brulee that's got a caramel 3 inches thick on top of it. So you have to be a little bit careful, but by doing 2 stages like this, you're able to control the thickness of the caramel. And this time, it should be a lot quicker because it's already caramelized underneath. So the process is a little bit quicker. Right, that is the finished article. And I think it's not only one of the most simplest desserts in the world, but for me, it's one of the very finest. That is a creme brulee French style.